Hi, I'm Amanda Jane Woodall and welcome to my fashion school. Smelly, dirty and right-wing was the London that had produced the punk movement, but it had become a bit mainstream as the 70s came to a close and now had evolved into beer culture, violence, spitting and a general sense of grimness. And so a new youth rebellion movement was needed in Britain, and it came in the form of a fantasy world inspired by David Bowie, historical costume, and European electro pop. It's the Blitz kids. Stephen Harrington left school with only an O-level in art. He was a loner and an outcast in his high school in Newbridge, and he became known as the first Welsh punk rocker when he dyed his hair orange and customised his school uniform. The isolation that he felt living on a Welsh council estate meant that he could not wait to escape to London, much to the heartbreak of his poor mother. And at first he felt pretty lonely in his London flat until he started to go out on the London nightclub scene and became noticed for his clothing and his theatrical makeup, which was based on the French Revolution. And so he became loved by sophisticated eccentrics and gained a cult following of young people who knew him better as Steve Strange. Music had always been pivotal in Rusty Eagan's life, as he had toured as a child alongside his parents who were Irish musicians. He banged on pots and pans from an early age until he was bought a drum kit at the age of 14, and he was incredibly talented and was accepted into the National Jazz Orchestra, where he learned rhythm and complicated beats. And this was until he found a love for a prototype of an electric drum board, and this started his interest in the synth pop movement. Rusty was pretty smart and soon gained contacts in the music industry, and he did this by auditioning for various different bands, including The Clash, which he narrowly missed out on due to not really believing in the punk politics. And so he formed an experimental band with ex-Pistol Glenn Matlock and frontman Midge Ure, and this was called The Rich Kids. At around the same time, Steve Strange had actually also started to front a band which was a shock rock punk band, and he became very interested in the Rich Kids and their kind of futuristic sound. And so Rusty and Steve decided to combine forces to make some money from this underground world that they had found themselves the centre of. George O'Dowd and Peter Robinson were two very flamboyant teenagers who managed to get a squat in the lovely Georgian homes that were abandoned in Warren Street. And George looked so interesting that he soon landed a job working in the alternative clothing store Street Theatre Boutique. Peter Robinson had been terribly bullied all his life for his feminine outfits and mannerisms, and so he took solace in the art studios of the school, obsessively drawing his idol Marilyn Monroe. And the other students, they would mock him and call him Marilyn, but he cleverly took on this identity, becoming Marilyn, and he wanted to get revenge by becoming a big name in London. Boy George and Marilyn, as they were now known, shared a wicked sense of humour, and they spent time together planning and creating flamboyant outfits and makeup looks inspired by art and sculpture. And they broke gender norms and used their style to fight for the right for a man to look pretty. And these four personalities were brought together when Steve and Rusty organised a club night for the new wave at Billy's nightclub. And this was the place to be for artists and designers and musicians who wanted a decadent and safe space to meet up and have fun. In 1979, Rusty and Steve changed venue and opened the Blitz, which became notorious for making men and women wear extravagant costumes to be allowed through the door. And very famously, Steve Strange actually refused entry to rock and roll legend Mick Jagger because he didn't dress well enough. And this got a lot of press and publicity for the club, as it appeared to be the most exclusive place to be. The clientele of the club was eccentric and eclectic and included homegrown superstars like Susie Sue and fashionistas like Jordan and Sue Catwoman. The club played a mix of different electro pop records alongside everybody's hero, David Bowie. And so the club actually changed the way that nightlife looked, because now the entertainment was actually the guests themselves. And what had started out as being a very small collective of about 200 people then grew into a youth cult movement and was labelled many things by the press, such as the Cult with No Name, Peacock Punks, the Blitz Kids, and they finally settled on the New Romantics. And British teenagers became excited to get in on this look, and so they started to be inspired by dandies and pirates and film noir to create DIY versions of the outfits. And there became some staples, although originality was the key, which were costume jewellery, very severe haircuts, frills and balloon sleeves, and pan-stick makeup. And young designers started to influence their friends to buy their handmade creations, which they first sold at market stalls and then went on to own boutiques in King's Road. And the New Romantics had opened a door for young people to be entrepreneurial, to create things, make things, and sell them to the customer base that was all around them. And after originally kind of dismissing the movement, the pop industry and record companies started to see potential to turn these Blitz Kid characters into pop stars. Visage was a pop band created by Rusty Eagan and Steve Strange, accompanied by Billy Currie and Midge Ure. And they created electro synth pop that had kind of a haunting, surrealist undertone to it. And they had a big hit, it's a cult classic hit, with 1980's Fade to Grey, which reached number 8 in the charts. And its popularity was enhanced by the style of the music video, which showed Steve Strange as the frontman kind of playing with symbols and patterns with his costume and makeup. As a very talented musician, Boy George was very unhappy about the success of Steve Strange, because he was admittedly bitter that he had beat him to pop chart success. But Culture Club would actually go on to be an iconic band of the 80s after a shocking appearance on Top of the Pops in 1982. And George knew that his ambiguity would create confusion amongst the audience, which led his first hit, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, to go straight in at number 1. And whilst in LA, Marilyn had seen Boy George in an article in the Face magazine, and they were furious that George was having success without them, so came back to Britain to record Calling Your Name, which was a hit in the charts in 1983, reaching number 4. However, it sounded very, very good on the radio and people enjoyed the song, but when they actually saw Marilyn and how progressive she was, this changed the feeling in the public to outrage and anger, and so Marilyn had a very short-lived pop career. Alongside this, Visage and Culture Club also imploded due to creative differences, problems with the management, and a vortex of substance abuse. Great art had been made as a reaction to a hideous political climate, but now it was 1985 and everybody was swept up in Live Aid fever, which came from people wanting to be less self-centered and more giving and globally conscious. They wanted to make a difference in the difficult world. The new romantics, they didn't want to fade away like the hippies and the punks of the previous generation, but unfortunately their dream had just been too big. And so they leave a legacy of inspiring young creatives to actually do something, get up, make things, and make life better. And that is still very inspiring. What's the door?